Hello and welcome. Glad to have you as one of our first guests in this podcast, and hopefully we will be recording more and more sessions together.
Really nice.
I would like to give you the mic to introduce yourself, and I have also a question about what does it mean to be a senior program manager in Logic App.
hmm Okay, so my name is Wagner Silveira. As you said, I'm a senior product manager in with the Logic Apps team. And I think one interesting thing before we go about the role itself is that I'm one of the field that is based outside US. So I actually live in New Zealand and that are able to work with the team remotely. Our whole team is like quite remote and that are able to work with that really well. So I kind of hold the front on APAC when we have customers and on that area. So what is a product manager in a way? Uh, there is a lot of different answers depending on who you're going to ask that, right? But
Mm,
then from my experience, so the things that I've been doing of those almost 3 years in the role is one of the persons responsible for inside one of the areas think a little bit about how that area is needs to evolve inside that. Like if you think about the product is going to be a group of areas or a group of features, how
mm,
those areas needs to evolve to delight the customer, right? So on my case, for example, I'm responsible, part of my portfolio is developer experience and
yeah.
community outreach, the two areas that I work. And I
Mm,
don't work on that by myself, right? So on developer experiences, we get one area of that, but then we have to iterate with the designer team, like front end team. We needed to iterate with the other features like custom code or even hybrid that also need developer story. So
mm,
I usually works in together with the other PMs to kind of wave that story how best developers should be served, like to
mm.
create integration solutions using logic apps, right?
That's sounds like
Yeah.
a lot to do.
Yeah. One of my questions and really interesting things is that I guess that your backlog is huge, and I guess that you get a lot of feedback. So, how do you manage such a backlog, and how do you like manage all the feedback that you get?
So some of the ways that we work on that is we trying to find patterns, right? So that we can receive five or six different requests from customers, but when we find those patterns and things that are similar or pain points that are similar, that's
Mm,
where we try to add that to the backlog. And in terms of prioritization, it is based on like how important that feature is going to be to the customer and also how much can you fit on that semester, right? So we usually work on semesters. So we try to get something that is a lot bigger in smaller chunks and then produce like parts of that story, but trying to keep the whole story together. That's why sometimes you don't see the things that might be the most pressing right now is because that one is something that is going to require like a lot of the back end and a lot of the front end work, a lot of the prep work before you actually attack that. So
Mm.
it's not that you're not working on those features, but a lot of the work ends up being under the surface for a while until it
Mm.
actually appear for the customer, right?
Yeah.
Even though we try to work as like work out loud as much as possible, some of the things needs a lot of prep
Mm.
before you actually get to the point where we can interact with customers and we can present that. And that's where the private previews are important, but also that interaction with customers on podcasts like those or the Logic apps, the stand-ups that we do, is to
Mm.
make sure that we get that feedback all the time, but also as soon as we have something to show, you see it early to get feedback early
Mm.
because the whole idea is the earlier that we get the feedback,
Mm.
the faster we can correct course if it's like our original idea was not as exactly what we needed or like what else is
mm.
required for that to be successful to that delight the customer.
Yes, but it also takes me now that with all of those things that you are doing, you are running 100 miles per hour, taking care of all of the developers and the new techniques that's coming out and we want to use. what does a senior product manager do when he is not doing all of this?
For like the inside Microsoft or outside Microsoft?
Outside Microsoft.
Outside Microsoft, I try to keep my mind clear by playing a lot of role playing games. And during COVID, I actually
Mm.
got into the miniature painting. So
Okay.
if I have like a really stressful day, a lot of meetings, if I
Mhm.
sit it on the bench with a miniature that big, and
Yeah.
right, I'm not exactly young anymore, and my eyes are not that bad. Like trying to paint something that is that small, I forgot about everything else
Yeah.
because I needed to focus too much
That's a
on the
really good
little
idea.
details.
Here at the Contica, we actually have this role-playing club.
Yes.
So, do you have any? What is your advice on what to play? If you can give one
And
advice.
I play Dungeons and Dragons because I've been playing that since uni,
Mm.
right? I had a group back in Brazil that I play for the almost 5 years. Then
Mm.
everyone else went to a different place. I moved to New Zealand. Then find out a group here. One of my nephews was like 14 years old at the time. I started to take him to the games. Then my kids were born. I had to stop because parenthood got in the way. Then
Mm,
my kids now are 14 years old,
mm.
and I'm starting to play with them. Well, at least I was playing with them until they finally managed their own group, so they kicked me out. And I started to play again with my nephew that was 14 years old at the time. Now it's 30 plus.
Uh,
So I
I
find
love.
places is usually a really good way to interact with friends and family. And I
Yeah.
always been a nerd. So like I
Yeah.
always love fantasy, sci-fi, and the computer. And
Yeah.
a story that when I was 15 years old, my dad saw like a second-hand bike, like
Yeah.
a motorbike, and he wanted to
Yeah.
buy it for me. I said, Dad, if you're going to spend money on the bike, buy me a computer. He went to a corner, cried for 3 months, and then bought me the computer.
That's
Yeah.
that's actually really good. You got me thinking also because I thought about this how to mix the being nerd and being right, like those games like role playing, because I also do sometimes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write one scenario or one game about Asher and the Dungeons and Dragons. So you have superpowers
Mhm.
while doing some integration. I don't know, but it's still this is in my head. If I get this idea together, I will send it to you.
Get that the Unicorn Project book and
Yeah.
try to
Yeah,
make it an adventure. That would be
that's
very
That's
interesting.
actually good.
that's a really good one actually. I read the book, so yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Thank you for the
I
suggestion.
Very
love
Maybe
good.
that
we
Very
will
book.
good.
get
Yeah.
version soon.
So let's jump back in time to Integrate 2024 in London earlier
Mm,
this year, and
Hmm.
your session regarding accelerating developer productivity with logic apps.
yeah.
So,
Hmm.
just first question, I guess that we talked about it a bit, but why this topic and why should people listen on this topic?
Well, we know that is for people to be successful using logic apps, they needed to have a really good developer experience, right? So that making sure that the people has fast time to market using those integration technologies is key. Making sure that they able to create successful but also secure deployments and repeatable deployments is also key. And this is one of the areas, for example, that we always knew that we needed to improve, but in order to get like the right things in place, we needed to take like we took some time to work on that behind the scenes and then surface that. So that's where we saw on the integrate, we bring in some of the announcements that we deliver some of the stuff just before integrate, but the big announcement was during integrate. The first thing that we tried to take care of was the perception that the extension was too hard to get started, right? So we knew that it was not actually a perception. We had like a group of prerequisites that was there because we needed them, but it was hard for customers that is not used to the environment to get that in place. So the first thing that we tried to focus was how to make sure that the extension can be installed like as smoothly as possible. That's where we had the whole idea of onboarding. And today, if you're looking at the extension, you're able to install it by simply clicking at the extension from the portal, because we install all the prerequisites, the extensions that we need, because we have a couple of prerequisites. We need Azure, we need functions, we need C Sharp, and we're installing all of that. But most of the important in that is the whole set of frameworks that we required. That was one of the biggest issues for customers. It was a very specific set of frameworks that sometimes clashes with the latest versions, because we needed to make sure that before we adopt the latest versions, the tool is ready for that. The way that we managed to break that problem for the customer is we take care now of installing those frameworks, and we install that in a location that is part of your profile, but you can configure if you want. With that, if you wanted to use the latest version of C Sharp or functions of runtime, Node.js, you can install on your system wide, because you're always going to be directing Logic App to that very particular slice, right?
Mm.
So this allowed them customers that might have like on the same machine Logic Apps development, but also functions development or C Sharp development in VS Code, don't clash anymore.
Mm.
So we solved that problem, and we continue improving on that. Like when custom code had the
Mm.
support for .NET 8, one of the things that we did was making sure that onboarding was now taking the manifest and say, hi, you also need .NET 8, so it's going to be installing for you, right? And that's the idea. It's like every time that you're going to have a new framework, a new requirement, we'll be able to add that to the onboarding. So the next time that you update your extension,
Mm.
everything is going to be there.
Yeah.
Also, we took care of that initial thing, because it was pretty much the first step is like we needed people to start using the extension.
Yeah.
Then after that, the next thing that we thought that was quite important, that was a big cliff for customers, was the process of creating CI/CD deployments, like creating your DevOps, right? So we elected to work with Azure DevOps and ARM templates, but automate this whole process for customers. You have a Logic Apps project ready, you tested everything is fine. You're able to, with one click and a set of commands, generate these scripts for deployment of Logic App application, deployment of any connectors that are required,
Mm.
then build and deploy. So you can plug that into your CI/CD and be able to run that on a regular basis,
Mm.
right? And the last item that we worked as a priority was, if you get to the point where we have a CI/CD in place, then now we wanted to make sure that when you're deploying things, you're not like impacting production,
Mm.
because a lot of those applications are going to be mission critical,
Mm.
I need
right?
also to take.
So that's why the other area that we elected to work on, that first range of developer experience components, was the ability for you to use deployment slots to create those zero downtime deployments.
Mm.
So we have all those three pieces there. It's easier for you to install. It's
Mm.
easier to you to generate deployment scripts. It's easier for you to deploy without impacting your production.
Mm.
Then with the things that we focus in now, it's like from integrate to now, the areas that we've been focusing on, that was making sure that we got all those components and get the feedback from customers, get the feedback from our telemetry, and making sure they are ready to go GA. Because
Mm.
if we're talking about enterprise components and enterprise applications, we know that the GA stamp is quite important,
Mm.
Yes.
either be for compliance or for peace of mind, but you wanted
Mm.
that GA stamp. So this is one of the areas that we've been like working towards. So we should be having announcements like later, closer to the end of the year, with
Mm.
those items being we actively working on them to
Mm.
be marking them as GA.
Nice.
And
Mm.
But
any questions so far?
yeah, yeah, I do have a question, because now I saw that's like it's effective in so many things that you mentioned are affecting the whole development process in so many levels. So it can be hard for the teams to understand what approach should we get, codeless or full code approaches, because it's using the same engines. We can use extensions, and you've been mentioning codeless and full approaches to automation of testing.
mm,
What would you
So
prefer? Which approach you would advise?
So everything that we talked so far, like all those items, was purely on the Logic Apps component itself, right? So that allow us to go and be able to the developer Logic Apps still using the Visual Code. Of
mm,
course, on top of that, there was like a whole lot of other improvements that came from other areas of Logic Apps, like the custom code that it was one of the areas that can't work to allow you, if you needed to extend Logic App, you were
mm,
able to do that without leaving the one, without leaving the environment during development, but also without leaving the runtime during
mm,
execution. That is going to give you like advantages in terms of performance, in terms of surface area for security, right?
mm,
That's
We've been investing on data mapping to make sure that the work that we're doing, and if you needed to do like data transformation, you're
Mhm.
able to do that again inside the same environment, and because of that, be able to plug in on the workflows, among other things, right? When it comes to to testing, which it was another area that we talk about on integrate. So our original proof of concept, or original idea was create an initial component that mimics the way that you work with Logic Apps,
mm,
right?
mm,
So the whole idea was that you would be able to create unit tests the same way that you created Logic Apps.
mm,
But we always knew that component would give you like the 60-70% of the process, but then there
Yeah.
was going to be cases that could be more complex, that
mm,
either would be too costly for you to mock, or to be too hard for you to create without like some kind of repeatability, or some kind of manipulation of the data.
mm,
Yeah, exactly.
We present that during integrate. We even open initial expression of interest for private preview.
mm,
But the feedback that we got after that from some customers, but also from our internal stakeholders, was that is going to take you to the 60-70% of the place, maybe 80%, right?
mm,
The problem is, our customers are going to adopt this and then have a cliff when it goes to those 20%. How are they
mm,
going to work on those 20%? And because we have some restrictions in terms of capacity, like either we work on that, we put that out, but then we're still going to have a cliff, or focus everything on the next step that was going to be Codeful always,
mm,
right? And making sure that you deliver Codeful first,
yeah,
because then Codeless becomes an amenity later. Like
mm,
we can still present that depending on the feedback of the customers, that they say, I love the way that you're doing the code, but later on I might wanted a simpler way to create tests for
mm,
those like basic scenarios. We could publish that. But with the pivot that we had, and again, it's like what we discussed initially, is like receiving all those feedback from stakeholders, and
mm,
working internally and making sure that we working on having the right capacity at the right time. We
mm,
pivoting to working on Codeful first, and
yeah,
we're still going to be something where we're going to guide, we're going to generate some code, but now it's going to be closer to what you see on a normal unit test
yeah,
in C Sharp, right? Is we're going to be able to, similar to what I show on like some mocking code in
mm,
integrate, you're going to have an area where you define your mocks. You're going
mm,
to have an executor that behind the scenes uses the same engine that Logic App, so you have the real truth.
mm,
And you're going to take advantage of the unit test framework of choice,
mm,
right, to create your asserts. So with
yeah,
that, we thought that one, that is going to allow us to get to that 100% coverage
mm,
in a way faster,
mm,
because in most of the cases, worst case scenario, you're able to write and creating the loops and things yourself. But
Mm,
we're going to be able to generate code and generate the samples from run history to
mm,
allow you to see the one creating the simple cases the same way that we were creating before directly
yeah,
from a run history, but give you all the base information for you to extend when you need.
mm,
So
yeah,
that is the reason why we did that pivot after integrate.
mm,
And one of the areas of focus of the developer experience engineering team
mm,
today is getting that to fruition, right? We already had a lot of work again under the surface. A lot
mm,
of the work that we were doing for Codeless was also already created kind of agnostic, like the
yeah.
runtime, the executor, all of that. But now we have to expose like an SDK, you have to expose the different ways to generate the code. And this is some of the areas that we're busy working now.
When I listened to your session in London, I was like, for myself, I thought that wow, it's a big announcement with unit testing. So, and I think that
And still,
yeah,
it's still like our focus to get that. So we just needed to make sure that instead of putting something there that
yeah,
customer might not use fully,
yeah,
right? Was putting something out that customers can use like 100%.
yeah,
And then after that, like most of the work that we did for the visual part is
mm,
not going to be lost. It's just kept away for now so we can focus on that.
yeah,
And based on the feedback of the customers, we reintroduce that later on out.
yeah,
For me, all of this actually, what you just mentioned about how the effort you're putting on the Codeless with Codeful experiences, it just made me think that like the developers are seeking to code more and do more things like in the back end, and they have been learning
Mhm.
for such a really long time, and I'm a back end developer, I want to do this. So it's quite a challenge for you to listen to the customers where they want everything to be more effective, and then you have the community, which is like the people who actually work and building
mm,
solutions, that they want to have more fun stuff to do.
mm,
Like
Mhm.
both are fun. I'm not. I don't want someone to misunderstand me and
Yeah,
sit.
I think is one of the misconceptions that you have with logic apps from the beginning,
Mm,
probably because it is like on that middle ground where from one side you have Power Automate,
mm,
and
mm,
then on the other extreme you have functions.
mm,
That is like people don't think them as too low code or
yeah.
too pro code,
mm,
right? We
mm,
what we're trying to make sure is that the logic apps is the orchestrator engine for all
mm,
developers. Doesn't
yeah,
matter if you're a low code developer, if you're a pro code developer, if
mm,
you are a integration like the classic integration specialist that was somewhere in between, like the people that come back from BizTalk roots where we still
mm,
created things in like a visual designer on the
Mm,
orchestrations, but was pretty savvy with C Sharp because you needed to do the extensions for pipelines, you needed to do the extensions for the expression code, right?
mm,
So I'm making sure that the tooling that we put in for customers reaches like that range of developers.
yeah. We are interested, and of course we will with this talk and everything that
mm.
happens in the community. But can you explain it for us, for someone who's might be new to this? How do you follow this roadmap, and where to seek information if you want to follow what's happening?
So the two places like this is like my kind of my other hat together with Kent and
Mm,
Alex Suniga.
mm,
Um, the community outreach programs that we have in place are something that we are really passionate about. Like I came from MVP community before, Ken came from MVP, Alex came from the unit working with the like robotics the teams and doing working with community as well. So we all really passionate about that.
Mm,
With that, there is two things that we do every month and trying to keep to a schedule so people knows more or less when it
yeah.
happens. We have a Logic Apps live every last Thursday of the month
mm,
at 11 a.m. Pacific. And on that one, if you go to aka.ms/LA live,
mm,
Mm,
you're always going to find either the next item ready for you to run or the recap of the last one. And we also have a newsletter because throughout the month we put like a lot of the articles out, right? So articles that we wrote on tech community, articles that might be on public talks, a lot of articles that we find from community that we are tagged or that they tag with the Logic Apps Aviators the hashtag. And we trying to collate and curate all of that and create a newsletter with like the best of breed of all the articles that we found that month. On that newsletter, we also try to shout out for people that is usually doing a lot of work on the community, either being putting a lot of blog posts or being like quite helpful on chat or on the social media in amplifying Logic App as much as possible, that we call the Ace Aviators of the month, right? This is quite different from the Azure MVP. This is like a kind of a grassroots community where we just wanted people to share that knowledge without
Learn.
like any kind of bar of entry. Is that we wanted to make sure that is like from the community.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go and find the newsletters, the best place to go is if you go to aka.ms/AIS Tech Community.
Mm.
That's going to send you to the Integrations on Azure blog on Tech
Mm.
Community. And from there, just subscribe because every month we're going
Yeah.
to have like first Monday of the month is the day where we are publishing the newsletters.
Is it something that you can try to give us in so just like drive people to this community? Is there something in the pipeline coming out soon that you can
That
mention
is
or?
actually this Thursday, Pacific time, we're going to have a community day. So one of the things that we did it last year and was so well received that we thought that would be a really good thing to do again this year is we did a community like kind of a conference, but instead of being trying to get like a renowned public speakers or the product group talking, we wanted people from the community to present either like a 15-minute presentation on a use case that they had a lot of trouble with and managed to solve, like what is the lessons learned on that, to like talks on new technologies, but all of them is coming from the community.
Yeah.
So if you go to aka.ms/Logic Apps Community Day, you're going to find the blog post with all the information, the agenda. We have MVPs, we have old previous Ace Aviators, we have like people that is a brand new to the community, all of them presenting. And I think by now we have almost 5 hours of content.
Oof.
So all of that is going to be streamed live, but then you're going to be available on YouTube later
Mm.
inside of the Azure Developers YouTube channel.
I lately have been following the Logic App Aviators and the community actions that you have been doing. And actually, I get a lot of information myself to get by the days and
Mm.
answer some questions because it's information that it's not complicated. It's in a simple, easy way to just get and know. It's like a small capsule of knowledge.
Community driven by like, yeah, exactly how
Yes.
it should be
Yeah.
driven, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, everyone
exactly.
is involved.
That's what I like it.
Yeah.
But like I just want to I cannot just end this conversation without one question because we cannot just not mention AI and how it
Mhm.
will affect our work as integrators. And why should we be careful while we implementing that? Because we have access to a lot of data. So we cannot just trust the AI.
Mm.
But I don't think it's that scary because it's just an assistant. What's your opinion about this trend and the movement about AI and how is it gonna
So
affect us?
especially when it comes to integration, I think there
Mm,
is like two ways to see that, right? So one is using AI as a tool for development.
Mm.
And on that, I think is you always needed to do that checking. It's like
Mm.
the auto generation of code is nothing new, right?
Mm.
It's like we have snippets of code being created before. We had a lot of things. We that actually generate code ourselves before by going to Stack Overflow or some other
Mhm.
places and copy and pasting code, right?
Mm.
But Same way that with AI, before you get in that code and put that in place, you needed to make sure that one, you understand that code, and two, that the code is doing what you have to purpose.
Mm.
So, like generally on AI, this is how I've been using that. Is
Mm.
like is a tool inside of your things, but you don't use a hammer all the time, and
Mm.
you don't use the hammer without making sure that you're hitting the right nails,
Mm.
right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I've been using AI a lot, especially all the co-pilots to help me to create content faster
Mm.
and collate information and summarize. They are great for that kind of stuff, and
Mm.
also for coding. I actually help me a lot with
Mm.
languages that I didn't know that I have to teach my son.
Mm.
He thinks
Yeah.
that I'm like really good at that, but it's because I have the base knowledge. I have a co-pilot close by, and then with that, I'm able to generate the code and then review it with him to make sure that the code is okay.
Yeah.
If you push that to logic apps, we seen AI in two ways. One is like again as a tool for developers, like how we can do something that accelerates development, and this is one of the areas that we've been working a lot. We started with the simplest area where we can help you to understand, we can help you to give steps to
Mm.
create or adjust your workflows with
Mm.
the workflow assistant that we put it on the designer, right? But the other area is actually using Logic Apps as one of the tools to actually generate the intelligent applications.
Mm.
I love the phrase that I think it was Harold that coined, but I can't make it famous. That is innovate where we integrate.
Yeah.
As you
Yes.
said, we are as integrators, we are custodians of data because like half
Mm.
of the things that you do is
Mm.
moving data
Mm.
across,
Yeah.
right? Not necessarily bulk data, but like really transactional data.
Yes.
Being able to actually inject that as soon as the data is committed
Mm.
into your models makes the work that people having to keep the model up to date and keep the
Mm.
model fresh a lot faster because we already have the data,
Mm.
right? We
Yeah.
already have the connections to not just augmented data with and systems because we understand that, but
Mm.
also the connection with the language models and the repositories for those language models.
Mm.
So that's one of the areas that we really think that is the Logic Apps gives a lot of value is accelerating that data collection for using the reg pattern, right? To the getting the data to
Mm.
ingest and then later on to retrieve.
Process it and
Yeah.
make value out of
Yeah.
it.
Mm.
And not just that we thought that it's so important that we actually created connectors for that inside the Azure ecosystems. And
Mm.
lately on the templates, one of the templates that we that are either already there or on the way to go is that reg pattern as a template that you can reuse.
Yeah.
But the other area that the intelligent applications need is once you reason what is the actions that you're going to take, and
Mm.
that again is a place where logic apps is uniquely not uniquely but like really well connected because creating those actions is
Mm.
something that we do every day. That's
Mm.
why the integration that we're doing, like making sure that logic apps can be a plugin on semantic kernel or can
Mm.
be an action on copilot studio is so important because
Mm.
you can augment that conversation with
Mm.
real actions using logic apps.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
if you think about the right use cases, logic
Mm.
apps give you a lot of that tooling to make that use cases become reality super fast.
Mm.
So you would
It's
say that Logic App is the orchestrator of this AI new trend music or track, or what you call it, like
It is
yeah,
because it is an orchestrator, right? And
yeah.
because a lot of those things are actually workflows, it
Mm.
is
Mm.
really well positioned to create those orchestrators. And
Yeah.
not just the other thing is like the time to market because you're able to get a lot of that and because we able to do the connections with the end systems, but
Mm,
and also with the other systems
mm,
relatively fast, then we can create those
mm,
super quick, be able to test and fail fast or push it to the next level
yeah,
very fast.
yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, we are running out of time, but we have two sessions, and not two topics that we want to discuss more. And one is we call it the integration love story. So it means that we more or less want you to give us some kind of small story on where you fell in love with integration and what was that love story.
Uh, that's an interesting one. So I was finishing a job. I was actually being made redundant on a company around 2005, and I was interested in going to another company as a consultant. So the first job that they have for me was you're going to discuss with those guys, and you needed to work with BizTalk. And I said, Biz what? I had no idea what that was, right? So on that one, I just got I learned BizTalk, or at least what was BizTalk, in a week, and started to work with that. And I fell in love with the whole integration space
Mm,
during that project that took me like a year and a bit.
mm,
After that, I've been working with integration since then.
yeah. So it's a good. Everyone has one story. So nice.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. And the last topic of the this talk is
Is
next.
so one of the most interesting questions we have is the next guest, and how can you challenge the next guest with a question from the current guest?
Hmm.
What would you have in mind for the next guest? Maybe you know the name of the next guest. It's Kent Ware.
So one of the things that I always find that really the interesting from Kent is like how much he loves outdoor activities and things like that, right? So while I think the way that I relax is working on those miniature paintings I've discussed in the beginning.
Mm,
For Kent seems to be running outdoors and playing golf, but with the schedule that he has that is really really busy, I really wanted to get a tip from here. It's like from one side a question but also a tip how
Mm,
he manages time to actually get like all that the work in place,
mm,
like the running the marathons and playing golf, on
mm,
top of being like the awesome not just program manager but also program manager lead that he is.
yeah.
and a community member, a great community member,
and and
above all.
yeah, one of the most prolific people on our team, not
Mm,
just on social media but also on YouTube. I
yeah.
love his videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great question, and we had a great conversation with you, Wagner. So
Yes, and
Thank you very
we are
much.
really grateful to have you here, and hopefully we will have you again in the future, and we will have more. I think the innovation will never stop, so we will always have new topics to talk about and
Hmm.
explore together.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
now I'm looking forward to see the Ken's episode.
Yeah.
I can
We
see
will
the answer
definitely
for the
share it.
question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. It was like it was really good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Wagner. And yeah.
And
Thanks,
we hope
Ahmed and
hopefully we,
Robbie.
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
See you
see you
all
again.
later.